Good evening, everybody. I call to order our SEAC meeting. We will start with our roll call. Maybe we can start with Andrea.
Good evening, everybody. Andrea McCauley, Superintendent for Inclusive Student Services.
Feel free to chime in. Everybody, you'll have to turn on your mic.
Tara Cully, Durham Down Syndrome Association.
I'm Russ
Jarvis, Learning
Davidson.
Disability Association, Durham Region.
Hey, Ron. Russ Davidson. I'm VP at Ajax High School representing DSAA.
Okay. Imran Syed. I'm representing DISA Elementary Principal.
Kathy Keaty, Voice for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children.
Kelly Burrow.
Sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
Kelly Kennedy, Ontario Association for Families with Children with Communication Disorders.
Okay.
Claudine Burrow, Autism Ontario.
Okay.
Donna Edwards, Trustee for Ajax.
Christine Thatcher, Trustee for Whitby.
Eva Kyriakides for the Association for Bright Children.
Carolyn McLennan, Member at Large.
Excellent. I think that was everybody. I think.
No, that's and Hannah Nguyen for Eastern Ontario.
Thanks, Hannah. I thought I had gotten you before. Okay. Let's move on then to the welcoming our guests that are joining us on YouTube and acknowledging that the Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school boards and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. We have received regrets tonight from Craig Cameron, Member at Large, as well as Elizabeth Daniel for the Ontario Association for Families with Children of Children with Communication Disorders, but we're welcoming her alternate, Kelly Kennedy, tonight. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Before actually we do that, I just want to sort of a couple of housekeeping things. I can't not necessarily see everybody on the screen. So if you notice on your top, at least on mine, it's in the top left-hand corner, there's a raise hand button. If you, for voting purposes, I'd like everybody to sort of use that raised hand button. I can see who has voted, as well as just to keep things easily and flowing smoothly. If you want to ask a question or make a comment, during those times when we ask for that, please use the raise hand button so that I can see who's asked and in what order, so that everybody has an opportunity to put their question forward. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the agenda? Donna, first, seconded by Tara. All in favor? If everybody could use the raise hand button, just to make sure I can see you.
Sorry, Eva, I can't see my raised hand button on my screen.
Did you download the nod?
The nod?
Nod that was on okay, that's okay. I can see you, so that's fine. We can add you in there. Claudine doesn't have it as well. Okay. I can see you, Claudine. So it looks like the motion is passed.
And
all right.
here, Eva, I put in the add-on, but it doesn't seem to be showing up. This is Hannah from Easter Seals.
Oh, okay. On the instruction sheet that was sent out, I know there was a link to add on a not button to your Google so that it allowed you. John, yes, you might have logged into another browser. So if maybe you want to just put that on chat, and maybe John can explain through the chat how to load that.
Oh, I followed the instructions and loaded it already, but it's not showing up.
Okay. If we're having any technical issues, just put them in on the chat. Jonathan is watching those, and he'll take care of helping you out with that. Okay.
Sounds good.
Eva,
okay.
Eva, I was not able to download it as this is a work computer, and we can't download anything onto the computer.
Okay, I can see you, so that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from the April 16th meeting? Is there any questions or concerns with respect to those? With respect to the minutes? No? Okay. Then can we have a motion then to pass the minutes from last meeting? Christine, motion, seconders? Tara, all in favor? Okay. Carolyn and Claudine as well. Okay, so motion is passed. Okay. Then we are moving on to the Inclusive Student Services Report. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Eva, and through you as chair, I welcome Lisa Drake, our Chief of Speech, Language, and Hearing Services, to present our department report this month. And Lisa brings highlights as well of the services and just how that is being highlighted as it is Speech, Language, and Hearing Month this month in May. So welcome, Lisa, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Andrea. I was having a little trouble unmuting. I'm assuming that I will share the slides. Okay. Let me just get started here. Sorry, everyone. Okay. Thank you, everyone, so much for having me here tonight. I'm truly proud to be here to be able to share the work of the clinical teams through Inclusive Student Services. And when I use the word proud, I really truly mean that. This is not a typical May is Speech and Hearing Month. This is a very different situation and landscape in which we are having this month. And I have been able to witness the incredible work that has been done within our department. And so I really put a lot of stock into the word proud when I say that I am proud to be here. So as I mentioned, it is May is Speech and Hearing Month. So this is our month where we promote speech, language, and hearing awareness. And we usually have quite a number of different things that we do for Speech and Hearing Month that unfortunately we're not able to do this year. However, the teams have worked really hard to come up with some social media campaigns to help promote the speech and hearing issues and awareness within the community. So we do have some did you know fun facts about speech, language, and hearing that are being promoted with the front of the board office, as well as through our social media avenues, as well as the board's social media avenues. Some other highlights that we have that I get to share with you. This is kind of the fun part of the report today, is that there are a couple of other things that we have come out with in the month of May, and one one of these things is the SLP story time. So on a rotating basis, every Friday at 1:30, a speech pathologist from our team will read a story live through Instagram. And I strongly encourage you to come and check it out. It's really designed for our young students. They're reading stories to promote literacy and oral language and vocabulary, and they usually pick a theme. So one week it was feeling words and how everyone is feeling within the book. And so they kind of do they make it interactive by doing some pauses, sort of similar to what you might see in a children's television program like Dora the Explorer, where they ask a question and wait. And some of the reports we're getting back is that the children are watching through Instagram Live and actually answering the questions, which is really kind of neat. We're getting roughly between 50 and 100 people watching the story live, and then when the publishers allow us, we're keeping the recording of the story available for 24 hours afterwards. So you can follow us at DDSB_SLH to check out our story time. And something else that's coming soon that I wanted to share with you that the speech pathologists are working on is a virtual speech and language room. So we have all submitted our Bitmoji avatars, and they're creating these different scenes with our actual team members inserted within the scene. And there will be many helpful links, information, videos, all embedded within this virtual room to share information for parents, for educators, and for the community, and whoever will be interested in accessing it. So this is just a screenshot of what that looks like. It's not an active slide, but that is coming within the next week or so, and we're really excited to get that out too. The really neat thing about being in this new virtual landscape is that it's really forcing us to become quite digitally creative in ways that we never have before. And also to show off some of the teams and the work that they're doing because of Speech, Language, and Hearing Month. I alluded to this last month where we talked about the interpreters, the ASL interpreters, who are really working quite hard to have worked really hard to get on board with all of the different technologies that are being thrown at them to try and support the students who do require ASL interpretation. And so I shared a screenshot of this video. So the woman wearing the woman on my left, I'm not even sure what side that is for you, but on my left is the teacher who is giving a lesson to her students and sharing information. And then Holly, the interpreter, who has her hands up in the air, she is interpreting synchronously with that educator, and then recording that video and sharing it with the student who needs it. So I thought it was kind of fun to get to actually see what that looks like for those interpreters who are doing asynchronous support for kids. Unfortunately, I don't have a video or a picture of one of our deafblind interveners, but believe me when I tell you, they are working very hard to adapt to the technological avenues that they're having to work through in order to provide the unique support for the students that they support as well during this time. And if I had a photo, I'd definitely share it with you. So those are some of the May Speech and Hearing Month fun pieces that I wanted to show you. And now I'm going to switch from that speech and hearing focus and really go a bit broader and talk more about our Inclusive Student Services team and what's being done during distance learning right now. So on the slide, you'll see the list of all of the people who are working with our department to provide that unique support for students and to make things happen, all the way down to our clerical support team at the bottom, who they don't get to see the kids, but they are integral in helping the rest of us function and do our jobs when we're in schools, and also now that we're involved in distance learning. So it is quite an extensive list of people that are all working collaboratively quite well. So to recap what we started doing, and I'm sure we covered this a little bit last month, but just to go back to that, to help you to sort of frame where we started with distance learning and where we are now. One of the big things that we first had to do at the gate was to help educators get distance learning off the ground. And while that has been something that's new for all educators to think about, we've really had to do some extra thinking and extra creativity for the kids whose learning styles are different and who need different supports. So we right away we were getting involved with tier 1 supports for educators who were supporting all kids across the system and making sure that they had access to high quality resources. We were also right away responding to an amazing amount of educator requests for specific resources for different learning profiles. So it was, especially with the speech pathologists, it was like a flurry of requests that were coming in, which really spoke to the relationship that exists between our teams and the educators, and the educators knew that they could rely on our teams for that support, which was really lovely. And then the other thing that we started doing right away was to support the small class placement teachers in order to make sure that the programming that they were trying to do for the kids at home, which needed to be very unique for the kids in those classes, we were right there with them to help them design those pieces. And so for our inclusive student services clinical teams, especially, they really prioritize that direct connection with students and families. That's the piece that they have been wanting to get back into doing as quickly as possible. And when we first got started, we were a bit limited in how we could do that, only by the fact that our colleges require us to have a secure connection when we're doing virtual video conferencing. However, we were able to do email, telephone connections with students and families right away. So that had been happening right from the outset of distance learning. So that's how we have been doing it until now. And on the slide, you'll notice that the next steps are to get a secure virtual platform, which we are in the process of doing. So our virtual services that we are shifting to are going to be more live, interactive, audio, visual. So a platform that's similar to Google Meet as we're meeting now. However, Google Meet isn't deemed to be secure enough for our colleges. So we have been working really hard on ensuring that we're securing one that is going to be robust enough to meet our needs. So we are in the process of acquiring one that we called AdraCare that has been vetted by many levels within the board. We have IT has looked at it, and our legal team has looked at it, and its servers are in Canada, so all of the data stays here, and so we're feeling quite confident about that platform. So that is in the works now, and it is where Andrea can probably give you a better update as to where we are at than I can. But this is the direction that we're going, and we're looking forward to having that platform so that we can do that direct contact with students. And the other piece that it will allow us to do is also to have the IPRCs that we haven't been able to have because we haven't had the platform. Without the platform, we can't get all of the clinical teams at the table, which we've needed to do. So we are in the process of getting ready for that, and we've been working with the schools to ensure that they have a tiered process for getting the most appropriate IPRCs up first, and then trickling down from there, so that we can get them all done. I'm also excited to share with you that we've figured out a way to ensure that we are able to take on new referrals at this time. So we had put that on pause while we were sorting out the process and the legal requirements because of our colleges around taking on new referrals. So essentially what has to happen is we need to ensure that there is consent given from the families to share that personal health information with our teams. And historically, that's always been done via a signed consent form. So in absence of being able to do that, we've crafted a pathway that is quite similar to the one that existed prior, but we're now able to do it using verbal consent, and we've been working with our special education educator partners in order to ensure that that's done in the way that it needs to be to ensure the privacy and safety of our students. So that is now underway. I'm going to share with you a little bit about what has been going on in the mental health side of our department, which is it's not my area. This is more my social work colleague Carolyn Usher, who has really been heading up these pieces. So I will speak to them as best I can, being the speech and hearing person and not the mental health person. But we've all been collaborating together. So I feel comfortable sharing these pieces with you, and they're also quite critical and really important within the distance learning model. So it's very important that you hear about them today. So we have developed a number of resources within the board to support well-being for staff, students, and their families. And these documents are being constantly updated. And I spoke with Carolyn today, and she wanted me to share with you that if there are any supports and community resources that you would like to make sure are included within these documents, please send them to Andrea, and Andrea will pass them on to Carolyn so that we can make sure we get those supports and contacts in, so that we're providing as fulsome a package to our families as we can. The other piece that we have had to work on is around coming up with protocols in order to ensure that while kids are at home, and when they're not used to being at home the way that they are, and with families that aren't used to being at home the way that they are, you never know what is going to come up for kids from a mental health perspective, and for their families. So there have been a lot of amendments to the mental health protocols within the system to ensure that anything that does come up, we can respond to in the way that is needed within the distance learning environment. And then another piece is that's been huge within our board is the engagement matters framework. So what's happened is historically with social work and attendance, they have looked strongly at showing up to class and how many kids are coming to school every day, and being able to check a box for attendance. And so now we're weaving attendance and engagement into the same thought process. So we can't count how many kids show up in class right now, but what we can do is look at how many kids are engaging within the school system. So just some highlights around what's been done. A survey was sent to the schools, and of this, more than 71,000 kids in the system, there were only 1,700 kids where there were questions about engagement. So what happened was they came up with a stoplight system. So they looked at all of the kids where there were questions about whether or not we weren't sure what was going on with them. So kids who were coded as a red. These were kids who had zero engagement with us through distance learning, and there were risk factors that were identified. So these were kids that we were worried about. The kids who were flagged as yellow, these ones we had more questions about. So there might have been logistical or tech issues. There might have been language issues where the families were not sure how to access distance learning because of the language barrier, but where we weren't worried about them from a safety perspective. And then kids who were deemed green they were engaged on some level. Or perhaps the family had chosen not to participate in distance learning, and really there weren't any risk factors associated. So when the stoplight system was introduced, really there were very, very few kids who fell into the red category. Quite a small number. So that was really helpful to take a look at that and see what came out of that piece. And the kids who were in the yellow category are also ones that were already known to social work, and so they had a pulse on what was going on with those families as well. So for those kids who fall into the red category, there different pieces that are being put into place to help ensure that there are supports there for those families where there is concern or risk in some level. But that was the first pass at trying to figure out who's out there and how are we doing. And then the last thing I wanted to share was that within our motto of this year of service in, service out. So we have to make sure that the staff that are providing the service out to the students, that we are ensuring that we give them the appropriate training and supports to do that job. So within the distance learning environment, we recognize that similar to the mental health piece for families, that social work is going to be involved with. We've got lots of staff members within our system who are going to be engaging online with students. And so not everyone is equally equipped to deal with any difficult conversations that come up from a mental health or potential suicide conversations that might emerge from our students or for our families. So we have provided them with this course called Living Works Start, and the Living Works company are the people who produce the assist program that we use within the board. So this course has gone out to, off the top of my head, I can't remember how many layers it's gone to within the system. Andrea will know for sure, but definitely within our clinical teams, within our EAs, within the schools. So it has quite a wide reach, so that we are equipping everyone to be able to support the students' mental health first as the priority as we keep going through distance learning. So that is the end of my report for today. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you guys very much.
Okay,
Oh,
sorry,
Catherine.
Catherine has a question. Sorry.
Sorry. I'm just wondering, and I don't know if this is for you, Lisa or Andrea, but I appreciate there's been difficulties to have everybody at the table for IPRCs with the technology. I'm wondering, though, with parents requiring 15 days to appeal a decision and 10 days notice, how that works. Like, what's our timelines for that? I'm just thinking from a parent's lens.
Sure.
That we haven't heard about IPRCs yet and don't know what's happening and are starting, like, I know I've had a couple of people asking questions about that, and they may not be the most pressing IPRC necessarily. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just wondering how that will work in terms of timelines for families, given that
I'll let Andrea answer that one, because she's definitely on the pulse of the IPRCs.
So thank you for the question. So the school teams are working through, I'm just sending out invitations now. And as Lisa mentioned, there'll be the opportunity for video connect, the opportunity for telephone connect, or also if there's a written communication pass. The key for us is really that input of families and our students in their strengths, needs, and placements, and emphasizing that. Within the documentation that's going out to schools, an absolute upholding of all of those processes, like you mentioned, in terms of timing for planning, as well as if there is an appeal. We would like to think that in the vast majority of cases, the conversations that started previous to this and the emphasis on the case conference, where the IPRC is that finalization of a decision, but not where it surfaces for conversation, like for a dialogue, that's all happened in advance, is there. The other aspect is we know that there are many parents and students, when we think of the number of our kids that participate in their IPRCs, which is really important, that they may not want to wait the days. And so school teams are planning on launching those as soon as they can. We just wanted to make sure that we could get all of the team around the table necessary to that conversation. So will we start shorter than 15 days on some? Probably. But only if that's the indication from families, and that's all outlined in the information. We've templated the letters for our schools to make sure that there's that emphasis on consultation, collaboration, timelines, and then where there's opportunity. We have currently just over 9% of our IPRCs completed, so we know that as a district, this is a full system push in the next few weeks. We're usually farther ahead of that. Obviously, distance learning had that pause, the COVID closures, but the advantage in timelines this year is that normally we would see a 2 to 3 week shutdown of IPRCs as school teams switched attention to EQAO. And that summative assessment for grade 9s as well as their 6s and 3s, and we don't have that in our obviously in our calendars this year due to the circumstance. So schools are absolutely feeling a bit of a time pressure. What we don't want is that to translate into a pressure for families. And so really making sure that those steps and processes, similar to the IEP doc, consultation, time, collaboration are all emphasized within the planning. So any parents reaching out through SEAC members or online tonight tuned in should be hearing from their schools shortly. As Lisa said, we wanted to launch it right rather than do a false start, including the not just the electronic communication and making sure that there's data security around that, but also in the transference of any of the materials, such as a draft of the IPRC form, or as it goes back and forth for signature, making sure that that's all under securities and password protected for our staff as well, which has been great for us to be able to mobilize. We think we're going to hang on to a bit of that after we're able to return to bricks and mortar, just as an accommodation flexibility for some of our families. A parent who is working and able to go into a workroom or log in from home to have the conversation rather than need to make arrangements for a full day, definitely something we'll want to hold on to as an option. But again, with the family being able to drive that and the school team having the privilege to provide the options. So great question. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Is there any other questions with respect to the presentation? No? Okay, then. Moving on then to the presentation with respect to the IEPs, documenting accommodations, programming, and programming during distance learning.
Great, thank you. And through you, I am just going to share my screen, but I think instead of showing the video, I'm just going to put the document up, and then we will share out the video if that's okay with everybody. Sorry, I'm just dragging it over. My apologies this evening. Can you see that okay? Great. So in terms of our individual education plans, to support the learning of all the kids, we really wanted to emphasize with our school teams that the full individual education plan remains active during this period of distance learning. But we do recognize with schools having closed in March, that students won't have had the full opportunity to demonstrate what was planned as a full year's worth of rigor and breadth in programming. So we wanted to emphasize flexibility, but we also wanted to make sure that we were upholding that commitment again to consultation and documentation with our families. And so this guide that you see on screen was developed and has been shared out with our schools. There is a video that walks schools through and narrated. We're happy to share that out with SEAC. And just in terms of capturing accommodation and differentiation during this time, without losing that footprint of what was designed to support the kids. So in that, it walks through, again, the legalities and that commitment that we have of why individual education plans are so important in the first place for our kids. School teams walking through a reflection, and then how do you document that? So we have suggested in Durham on our template that for our kids that have alternate or modified curriculum, that an additional page be added and that the subject be distance learning spring 2020, and that anything that was specialized to this time frame be captured on that page, and an invitation to schools to use the designation DL for distance learning at the end of any specific expectation already embedded for modifications and alternate curriculum, as well as the addition of any accommodations adding. For instance, one of the examples in the document is Screencastify for assessment purposes. The document walks step by step. You can see the identified numbers and steps for our school teams. Anything in purple font is recommended text and then individualized. And then again, that emphasis on the consultation log being where we're capturing that ongoing consultation with families. So as I said, there is a video that accompanies that has gone out to our school teams, and we'll share that out with SEAC, as well as the document having come attached to the agenda this evening. But we really wanted to make sure that there was a documentation trail, not only for what was captured this year with a significant amount of the school year impacted, but so that those conversations and foundations are carried forward into the planning for 2021. So happy to take any questions on that, but we thought it was really important that rather than it just be an email or a conversation with our school leaders and our special education leaders, that we publish our board's commitment, again, to individual education plans, accommodation planning, and then how that becomes standardized for our close to 12,000 learners that have these in place for them as a foundation.
Any questions with respect to this? No? Okay. Then moving on to business arising from the minutes. I know from my perspective was putting together the list of potential items for discussions for next year. And sort of last meeting, I sort of reminded everybody to send them out. So far I have the list that we sort of had at that Diane had taken at our meeting, and a few that Kathy had sent to me via email just following. So I am going to compile that list and send it to Diane tomorrow. And then maybe Diane will be able to circulate that sort of going forward. Kathy had mentioned maybe for June we could talk about what practices might allow parents and children not to feel as if September is not a time to have a new start over with building understanding of a student's disability. So maybe we could look at that for next month's meeting. If everybody is in favor of that, that could be our discussion piece for next month's meeting, and I'll put together the rest of the list, and we can just kind of start going through that next year. Little bit by little bit, okay? And I'm just, there was a couple of questions, I think, Andrea, and I'm just gonna pull the minutes back up here. Supporting by Dixie, May agenda transition planning during COVID relating to school closures, which I think is what we just talked about. Grandview Children's Center services for family during COVID. You were going to look into, Andrea, I think. It had to do with a question from Hannah.
Yeah. They have continued to provide video services as much as possible. And then the ministry announced last week that our children's health providers are able to start considerations for face-to-face supports. And I know that Lorraine, the executive director for Grandview, has posted a message for her families saying that their senior team is in considerations for that. We've also flagged it for our board executive team as well, knowing that Grandview has that satellite site at SA Cocker. And so that's being flagged for our facility services team, that a potential request will be coming in, that we will do that in tandem with the Grandview main site, as well as the second satellite at Dwyer and the Durham Catholic District School Board as well.
Great, thank you. Excellent. Any questions with respect to those items carried over from last meeting? Okay, moving on then to board report being presented by Christine tonight.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through you. On behalf of Trustee Edwards and myself, I'd like to present the following information to the SEAC committee. The board has approved a new dress code. This dress code was thoroughly researched and investigated over the past year. by a committee that includes input from all stakeholders. Student voice, it is reflective. It's important to note it is reflective of student voice. It will be approved annually by each school. Additional information around distance learning. Information was provided at the meeting through Acting Director Nora Marsh with respect to distance learning. Input and feedback is being received on a regular basis by the board through the Thought Exchange program. And through the Thought Exchange program, our parents and families are telling us that they appreciate the flexibility and consideration that is being given to the varying schedules of our families. They appreciate the fact that there's consideration also being given to the changing needs as this process is extended. Parents also have told us that they would like to have more live interactions with teachers, two-way communication, whether it's live or otherwise. Lisa mentioned the additional training by our educators, our teachers, and Acting Director Marsh mentioned that since April the 15th, there has been over 4,000 educators that have participating in improving their skills, and primarily this would be in program planning and in the area of technology. And this is all in support of our students through distance learning. So in comparison, elementary and secondary feedback, there are more similarities than differences in that feedback. One difference that we noted was that secondary students preferred to have all of their assignments given at the front end of the week to assist them in their planning throughout the week, whereas elementary students appreciated receiving items throughout the week. This is just a message from Trustee Edwards on her behalf. I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of you for providing feedback on the committee, feedback from the committee with respect to her involvement in the Kindergarten to Grade 12 Standards Development Committee. So your feedback was greatly appreciated, especially given the short notice that unfortunately happened. So that is my report, Chair. Thank you.
Great. Does anybody have any questions with respect to the board reports? No? Okay. Then moving on to association reports. Do we have, anybody have any association reports they'd like to bring forward right now?
Eva,
Yeah?
can we double back to the admin report? May we double back to and do the administrator report?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I missed that one. Sorry, back to the administrator report. I'm sorry, I missed that one.
No, you're fine. There's just a couple of key updates. So thank you so much. So first, I would like to start the administrator's report with a thank you to our SEAC partners, community agencies, families, and at the absolute center, our students. The creativity, collaboration, and compassion with which we together have responded to COVID-19 and the school closures has been nothing short of impressive and heartwarming. And I echo Lisa's comment about it being with pride, sitting as a member of this team, as well as the department team. So on behalf of the Inclusive Student Services Department team, I would like to share appreciation to each of you and the organizations and families you represent for the ongoing conversations as we work together, both to focus on the well-being as well as the continued connections during distance learning. It's the valuable input of families that's continued to enable us to individualize supports and on an ongoing basis, make refinements, that learning with our kids has been reciprocal, and definitely lots of stories coming from significance of educators, families, and students on that. So just a couple quick updates this evening. Just to echo and put in the minutes that the ministry did announce on Tuesday that our schools will remain physically closed for learning until the end of June 2020, with a continuity of distance learning during that time. The PA days scheduled for the end of the school year have been converted into instructional days, which is really important for our kids and families as well. We currently have system teams working on two different things. One is the student and staff retrieval of materials. Hot off the presses of the minister's announcement, we started receiving inquiries from parents around retrieval of materials, so we're working on that and how to do that in a safe way. For the confirmation with SEAC, our students who have health considerations and or complexity of variables requiring accommodations, they will be able to access first before their peers are able to do so in their buildings. We're also scaffolding in, especially around students who would be leaving the district, such as our grade 12s, as well as our grade 8s, and the needs for imaging their computers, and an absolute commitment to keep computers and C equipment with kids as long as possible, as we know that distance learning will go to the end of the school year. Our health foundations will be formed by the health department, and we'll start the planning centers on that. We also have teams looking at the considerations for reopening for September. The health guidelines that will form the critical pieces to that will not be known for some time, but we're planning on all kinds of different contingencies. And that includes things such as if we're in a learning model with some accommodations needed as we move fluidly between home and school, what color marker shows up on whiteboards most easily, confidentiality and privacy of students, the need for, if teachers are going to need to be masked, for us to actually have full face shields for our kids who require lip reading accessibility, to supporting students, staff, and staff while they support students. So those are our categories of thinking. The team is currently immersed in IPRC planning, and we touch base a little bit on that. Many of that comes in the foundation of the plan and the footprint for our special education programs that started back in January, conversations with our parents. One of the items that I will bring to SEAC's attention is that we have had an influx, again, of students requiring or benefiting from life skills and or developmental level programming. And so those classes have been increased for September, and it has caused a shift in some of our school support programs, again, as we come out of the review, but in general, in really good position. And again, with thanks to our trustees for supporting kind of that whole budget process around resources and supports. I just have a couple staffing highlights as we've got a shift to the team. I think it does speak to the value of inclusive programming leadership, that we have 2 facilitators currently on pool hire lists for vice principal positions. So Michelle Durand was announced as a successful candidate earlier this week for the elementary vice principal pool, and Cheryl Wellwood, who is a facilitator with the autism resource team, was already on the secondary vice principal pool. So we welcome both of these educators back to the Inclusive Student Services team in September, where they'll continue to lead from those positions through to their placements as school administrators. Our department is also being supported in expanding our model of education officers. So currently we have 1, Officer Kyla McKee. And on Tuesday night as well, it was announced that Michelle Crawford is the successful candidate for a second educational officer's position, which will commence with the department on July 1st. So that really gives us a robust team together with our clinical leads and chiefs to provide supports out to our families and schools. And just finally, 2 quick points. At this time, boards have not yet received information about the 2021 school year budget. The GSNs have not yet come in. As an important advocacy voice, SEAC's opportunity to provide deputation to the Budget and Finance Committee remains within our planning. Acting Director, Associate Director, Carla and I have been talking. We were hoping that they would be the presentation this evening, but we don't have that information. So we respectfully ask that SEAC does plan for who would be doing the deputation. Just we might be slightly out of cycle from our SEAC meeting, so it would be helpful to have that kind of ready to go. And our budget finance team will support those individuals once we have the information, and then we'll bring all of the information back here to SEAC. As well, we'll be sharing a flyer. Our engagement team, as a system, has immobilized the Parents as Partners Conference to be facilitated on an online format in the evening of May 28th. So it's really fantastic. That's a really well supported conference that normally occurs on a Saturday. We have moved it to a visual video conferencing, and we'll share the flyer out with all of you and ask that you share that widely within your organizations. That would be our administrative report for this evening.
Thank you, Andrea. Any questions with respect to the administration report? Rowan? Rowan, go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me? Perfect. Yeah, so I was just listening in respect to the, I was thinking about the transition for the students, particularly in the LD community. Basically, I know we're reaching out to them, but I wanted to know what the feedback from them are, because I know in the community sometimes just using the online form isn't necessarily the greatest, but it is what we have and it's what we're using. I also wanted to know, just one, to get their feedback, and two, I know there's only certain things we can have the communication because we don't have that platform that we're able to speak on quite yet. I know that's something that we're currently working on. Is that something we'll be working on to, like, before the season, before our semester is completed, and if it's not, how are we getting that communication to the students that are transitioning?
Thank you. So through you, Chair Eva, if you don't mind. It's okay?
Yeah.
So Rowan, thank you for those questions. Very thoughtful. In terms of the online format, we're just in those final last considerations with the company. And our three clinical leads have already framed out kind of our first 3 tiers of training in order to make sure we've got a pilot group. The company has said they'll be responsive, any tweaks, and then we're on full rollout. So we're really, really close in that regard. In terms of the feedback from the students, we're always happy to receive through your organization as well. What we're mainly hearing from kids right now, once we lose kind of an assessment component to learning for a lot of our secondary students, they attach a value that learning and the marks kind of go together. So we've seen a bit of disengagement that way, and a concern for loss of content going into next year. So we're taking a look at that. But our main comments right now are coming from our grade 8 students and the concern around that grade 8 to grade 9 transition. So our team and the curriculum team, as student success resides in that department, are currently working to support what can look different over the next 4 to 5 weeks to really make sure that we've got some solid transition plans in place. And what are we supporting and sending out to kids on that all, some, few model. So what are we doing for all of our grade 8s, just as an example of a macro transition? And then what are we doing for the ones that need it to look a little different? And then what are we doing for the specific students that need it to be individualized? We'll know more as we have information about how much we can access our schools in the next 4 to 5 weeks as well, as that will impact release on that is helpful to us in terms of fostering those transitions. And then I think one of the other conversations that leans into this is a really robust conversation around teaching strategies and pedagogy, because this is our opportunity to kind of unlearn, relearn strategies and build it with differentiation in mind as well. So we see a really, and Lisa mentioned in feedback that you're hearing. Happy to take that back to the team and for us to embed it.
Sorry, Angie, I think you froze. I don't know
You're
for everyone
freezing
else.
up, yeah.
So for the last
Oh,
minute
I'm
or
sorry.
so, it's okay. If you could just repeat the last 2 minutes. Sorry
Oh,
about that.
I apologize.
Thanks so much.
I apologize. Just that we are looking at those transitions, and it is our opportunity to kind of recreate pedagogy a bit as we redesign education and put those continue on that pathway of moving accommodations more forefront in the planning. That commitment to continual remover of barriers is something we uphold through our Ignite Accessibility Plan. But if you're hearing any feedback or as SEAC reps, you're welcome to email me, or we can book a phone conversation as well. Happy to take your feedback to the planning tables. SEAC has a really important voice and would love to leverage your ideas.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions with respect to Andrea's report? Yeah, Donna? Donna, go ahead.
Thank you. And it's more of a comment in that along with the announcement for basically school to not continue for the remaining of the year, the ministry after that announcement also released a document called Ontario's Framework for Continued Learning. He did bring out some important points, but also new questions. What is interesting is in that I was listening to the news that he actually mentioned MAXI and the Standards Development Committee in his announcements. So I do know that apparently MAXI has been meeting every 2 weeks with the minister's group. And then of course, he asked us very quickly to answer those questions. But some of the things that he mentions in this framework sort of thing is he does mention some summer programs, in particular a new 2-week program around skills development and learning and routines establishment for students with autism. I know there's no specifics, but he does mention that, as well as he talks about, in that document, it talks about planning for the 2020-21 school year and strengthening learning and building partnerships with a variety of companies to help deliver access to technology and tools. But at the very end, which is really, I think is important to note, that he does ask if you want, there's a written submission that you can send in your ideas or some of the gaps and barriers or so forth through email to edu.consultation@ontario.ca. So I would say that it would be really key for organizations or associations, if they haven't already, to look at that document, and it does ask you to submit sort of your plan to reopen schools. There was, I think it was UNICEF that I had just recently left that had a framework for opening schools that I had just received. So that's just some additional information, but I know it might raise some additional questions from members if once they do read that document. Thanks.
Great. Any
Donna?
other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
Yes. Would you be able to provide the link that you mentioned, maybe in the chat for us?
Yes, I will.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
Just as follow-up to that, all of the superintendents for special education and curriculum for the Barrie area were together today, and we were joined by 3 ministry representatives from student success and special education as well. And so very much, Donna, one of the questions was around the details for the summer learning program. And one of the things we highlighted was that we do have 5 schools that are on modified calendar start. And so having information framed from Labor Day forward, we needed sooner. And respectfully requested that so that we could accommodate all of our learners. So we look forward to those details. We meet again provincially as special education superintendents. An invitation today came out for Tuesday. So we're hoping that there's more details at that point.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions? No? Okay, so moving on then to the association reports. Any association reports? Yeah, Catherine, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Happy Speech, Language, and Hearing Month. We do dress loud this month. So if you decide to just wear bright colors one day and you put on your bright track pants and want to post it, you can call yourself dressing loud from home, and it all counts any day of the month. I just also wanted to mention that we have updated our website with COVID-19 resources, and I know that many of the hearing resource teachers have been sharing this widely with teachers in DDSB, but there are also some mental health resources and links to different services, like there's something about first aid for feelings, and it's a workbook through Yale. So it's not like we're a nonprofit with no paid employees, so we don't have a lot of money, but we do gather things from others quite well. And so there are some supports for learning at home and accessibility. And I know that from a mental health lens that some people have found it useful, even if for their children who maybe don't have hearing loss but are struggling. So I just wanted to share that with everyone as well. Oh, and we've extended scholarship information as well, so I'll send that to Diane.
Great. Any other association reports? No? Okay. Moving on then to correspondence.
Yes, Eva, I guess you didn't see my hand up there.
No,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, if you can use the hand up in the left. Oh, you don't have that on yours, do you? Sorry. Sometimes my bar goes across people. So go ahead, Hannah.
Yes, yeah. So there's just been some changes to programs and services through Easter Seals Ontario. The first, of course, being that the summer camps have been canceled, but they have been moved to virtual summer camps. And any clients who were eligible for the camp, they can register for those. And there's just some additional consents that are required because they'll be using video conferencing. The second major program for Easter Seals is our equipment program funding. And so approvals are still on pause. I don't recall if I gave that update last meeting, but they have been on pause, mainly due to the change in the fundraising that happens through Easter Seals Ontario, with a lot of events being in person. And but all of the applications that were approved prior to COVID-19 are still moving forward, and we are hopeful that we'll be able to accept some applications later in the year. The third program that's offered through, that we administer through the government is the Incontinence Supply Grants. So that continues to accept and process applications, though there may be some delays there. And there's also a top-up grant that is connected to the incontinence grants. So those are still ongoing as well. And those are some of our changes to programs and services.
Great, thank you, Hannah. Anybody else with association reports? No? Okay. So moving on then to correspondence, we received a letter from Hastings and Prince Edward County, and that's with respect to the proposed changes to education for online learning and class sizes, etc. But I think that's all been turned on its head anyway at this point. But it's pretty much echoing the concerns that all the other boards had raised. And then there was a letter from Nipissing Parry Sound that was echoing our concerns with respect to Maskey and supporting the idea of having SEAC reps from each area as representatives on Maskey. So I don't know if there's any questions with respect to those 2 letters. I'm not sure. I know that during this period of time, I believe that there was an agreement we reached with the secondary teachers, the OSSTF, and I'm not sure what that involves in that. But from what I did hear on the TV the other day, the classroom sort of had maintained size. So that's about all I've gotten. Go ahead, Andrea. Oh, go ahead,
That's
Donna.
okay. I'll pass it to Trustee Edwards.
Yeah. Ahead,
yes. Basically, it's 1 to 23 is the class size, as far as that's concerned, and it's kind of funny because it did report in the newspaper that it was all finished and ratified and everything is it, but officially it doesn't get ratified until all 3 parties ratify it, and OPSPA just ratified part of it today, and as far as and I know they released a statement as well, but if it doesn't, and then there's also the OSSTF education workers, and that is actually a council of 4, so it has to be ratified by each of the different school boards, so French, English, and whatever. So I think that's kind of funny, but yeah, it's 1 to 23, and so which is people are very pleased about, for sure. And I think that was all you need, but I guess and the other thing, and both in the education workers, there's also that I keep on calling it local priorities grant, but I know it's not that, but it makes more sense to me than the student something success something, I don't know, grant what it is, but there is that piece in it as well, for both secondary, the OSSC teachers as well as the education workers, and what for the teachers, it actually is supposed to bring 1 teacher, as teachers, as a single teacher responsible around special education and supporting students and curriculum and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see what the GSNs really do reflect.
Did you have anything to add, Andrea, to that? No? My one question with respect to that was, is there any word on the requirement for online learning? Did that issue get resolved?
It is still, as far as it's still a mandatory 2 credits. However, there is the option for parents and to opt out of that. But also keep in mind that it's a 3-year agreement, and it will start for this cohort going into grade 9. But the agreement will be finished before the agreement will be the end of the agreement before this cohort actually graduates. So, you know, who actually knows, but right now there is a mandatory credit, but there is an option for parents to opt out, our students to opt out.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Kathy?
I would just add that the cap in the online is much larger than the class average. It's like 32. So if you're not loving it right now for your students, imagine when there's 32. And while we can have children opt out, there is an equity lens that if the staffing isn't there, there might not be other courses for them to take. So talking to parents about strongly advocating early is going to be important, because there won't be extra funding for kids to be in regular classes that are smaller potentially, because this is all about cost savings. So if it is mandatory, they're not going to staff the school as if nobody's taking it. They'll staff the school as if they're putting 32 kids in each of those online courses. So speak up early, speak loud to get the classes that you want, because while it is something you can opt out of, that doesn't mean that it guarantees there's another seat available in another room for that child.
That's good to know.
So
Donna?
just a supplementary. It's actually in the agreement, it's 30-1. It's not 32-1, just so you know, for online learning. It's 30 to, in the agreement. I've got the agreement.
Well, I have the agreement too, so it might depend on different areas, but there's caps and averages too, right? So
yeah,
we'll see. You can also
it's an average, not a cap, but it's an average of 30-1. But the other thing is that you know, I do agree with some of your comments, but the biggest thing is that what hasn't been determined by the ministry is the which has been the whole concern, is around how the funding is going to work around online, and the impact on the FTE. So that really hasn't been ironed out, and what it's going to look like in the GSNs. So I do agree with your caution, but we still haven't really we don't know what it looks like in the GSNs yet.
Okay. Well, that will be interesting. Any other questions with respect to that? All right. Moving on then to item number 12, community concerns. Whether or not anybody's been hearing, you know, concerns with online learning or suggestions to maybe make things better, or
Hannah here from Easter Seals.
Okay, Hannah.
I'm just going to turn on my camera again. I think, you know, we've just been hearing a bit about some family worries and suggestions for the transition back. And I know Andrea did mention that we're welcome to give feedback to her. We could also want to flag it on at this meeting, and maybe asking when we might, if the board will be seeking some of our feedback when you are ready to gather that information more as a group, not just individually, because I do think sometimes that discussion around all of the different issues prompts different ideas, different thoughts that come out. So it's a bit of a question and a comment. So I think definitely that is the major one. For a lot of our Easter Seals families, the main concern is just around the PPE. We have a lot of children who have very specific physical needs that aren't able to do physical distancing, and then also things from drool as one of the things that the EAs might be assisting with, to you know, nursing needs and all of that. So I think that's definitely on our families' radars and a concern, and whether as families we are ready to return our children back to school, and whether we feel comfortable given some of their vulnerabilities, and then as such, wondering around, you know, what will be some options if we're not wanting to return them to school. And I know those are all under discussion, but as this is part of the discussion, is just what are some of our community concerns. I would say that those are some top right now on the families connected to Easter Seals.
Through you, Eva, if that's all right. So Hannah, thank you so much for bringing that forward. I think through your input in SEAC, certainly Easter Seals and the other organizations comes up frequently in our conversations around those important consultation points and hearing from individual families for individual students, but what are core considerations. So absolutely we'll ensure that there is that opportunity, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. Dialogue spawns ideas. For sure, we've seen that active this week, both in terms of our system team and then today with the other superintendents. We've said let's share the plans across boards too, because what one board misses, somebody else will have accounted for, and vice versa for the lens. So absolutely. I think on the note of PPE, And again, Lisa and I were in a conversation with some of our clinical leads today. We're going to have things that need to be replenished, and we're going to have things that are going to need to look different. So we're starting those conversations. Again, if I can encourage kind of thinking students, staff, and staff supporting students, that when we kind of go with those interaction pieces, different things surface. So I would just for tonight, two confirmations. One, consultation, absolutely. Important voices. And two, to know as well that highly supportive of DDSB's commitment to move PPE over to our healthcare partners. That was a really important partnership. The replenishment order has already gone in because we know that there might be a significant wait time. And so what we've done is we've submitted the order for a replenishment of any PPE that already moved over to healthcare. So we have that. And then we're looking at those nuanced pieces. But definitely this is going to be an ongoing conversation as we keep tweaking it. But definitely flag that, and we'll plan for that with Eva as well.
Great, thank you, Andrea. I see Tara has her hand raised. Go ahead, Tara.
Thanks, Eva. Just from the community concern, just parents, I think, are tired. I can imagine that we are all tired. And I'm not even doing the bulk of the child herding, as I like to call it every now and then, because it is pretty much like herding the cats on occasion. Trying to keep them focused, trying to keep them engaged is tough. But I'm lucky in that my husband's able to take on the bulk of that. I'm working from home and doing that. Some families that I'm talking to do not have that luxury. They are trying to get their work done because they have to work and then still try and take off in the middle of that work day, trying to get that going. As things are starting to open back up, are we trying, what's our strategy for trying to make that transition? We've got to work in tandem with that child care, with all of those things. What does that look like? You know, some students still need full-time support because if parents are going back to work, what does that before and after look like? How are we going to make that work together? Are considerations being handled with that?
So on that, Tara, really great points to bring forward. No answers at this point, as we just saw that release. I think the framing, leaning into what Hannah said as well, we now know what summer programs look like in terms of community, no overnight, but day camps running. We know that we're preparing for the next phase of childcare openings, and we certainly are infused on our sites for that. So there'll be impact there. So a lot of information to be determined, but I hear you absolutely. I agree. I think parents are exhausted. And some have been challenged more than others in terms of this, and everybody's resiliency and what they have access to has evolved through this as well, and we've seen families ride. I think this has tested the most resilient amongst us as well, in terms of that, and everybody's got that permission back and forth. Our staff at the same time have been doing the provision of service while doing the exact same balancing at home, many of them as well. So I think it is, we need to move thoughtfully and in a comprehensive way to catch those ends, and do a really good job of taking a community approach in looking after each other. So I apologize for not having any details of a plan for you tonight, but please know that anytime we have conversation around students, we have conversation around the people who are providing the care and supervision to them and the love at home, both from a wellness perspective as well as that educational component, but with that wellness and connections piece being the front end of that.
Thanks, Andrea. If I can just add one additional thing on that, are we anticipating with return as well on reflective of that mental health as well, with children may be anxious, think, I don't want to go near my friend Johnny in case they're sick. You know, are we kind of keeping that? I'm assuming we are, you know, saying is that's going to be thoughtfully added into that reintroduction of everybody back into the playground, I guess.
Absolutely, and I see Lisa nodding as well. So we've talked about social stories, we've talked about scripts, we've talked about even with our principal reps, how do we engage students in learning games that don't require proximity for when they're outside, and how much of that can we get out ahead of the start of the school year through student voice as well. So absolutely, our kids, I think for some of them, when you say there's an invisible kind of enemy that you can't see, that already sits on a point of concern for them in a general basis. There'll be some of our kids thirsting for that social connection, and there are others that this is a perfect world for them in terms of that online connection. So it's going to layer in differently. We've talked as a senior team a lot about classroom communities, and everybody's going to enter from a different point of some kind of degree of traumatic experience from this dramatic shift. Even those well positioned from a continuity of love, well-being, food, all of those pieces, this is still hit. And then we've got those that have had risk factors that have just been amplified immensely and continue to be. And so our educators are going to have to be really well prepared to differentiate support, but also bring all those kids back together in a way that is supportive of them. So, really great points, Tara. And not surprised that your comments come from the heart about kids and families this evening too. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there any other comments on community concerns? Celebrations and successes? Then moving on to that. No? Well, I have one. Oh, sorry. Tara raised her hand. Go ahead, Tara. Oh, Catherine too. So Tara first and then Kathy.
So even on that note, I still had to say, it's been great. The kids have been, getting into doing online tea parties with their friends. And so apparently my oldest Adam has been doing a lot of inviting to anyone and everyone who will listen. I'm sure if he was here, he would invite everyone here to a tea party. So it's been really good to connect that way. And it's been, I think, a really good outlet for a lot of the kids that they can actually get through that stuff. But he's been great in that he's actually wanting to participate. So in a lot of cases, it was not even wanting to talk to grandma on the phone sort of thing. And now he's like, oh, hi, so actually getting that physical, that physical, sort of visual reaction from him to be actually able to interpret. He can actually interact with people on the screen was amazing. So it's been happening over this past 2-3 months, but it's been fantastic. So I'm super enjoying that. And so I thought I would share there is somewhat of a good side to some of this. He gets to see his friends even at a distance. So
I just wanted to share that my voracious reader,
fantastic.
my voracious reader who has read everything and is killing me with Amazon orders, casually that came up to the teacher, and the teacher very kindly came and did a social distance and book drop off to her house. So
oh, that's awesome.
That's so nice.
Yeah. Definitely.
Anybody else? Well, I can say that we were very happy to put our first year of university underneath us successfully, which is great. It's very excited to be done. Unfortunately, summer job hunting is not going that well, but luckily she's got some support there too. So, and I must say that as far as success goes, I'm hearing sort of some really great stories of teachers doing some really great things like that to sort of connect with their students. I saw a post today, I think through the DDSB, that one teacher had dropped off little care packages with handwritten notes to her students' houses, which I thought was just lovely. It just lets the kids know that the teachers are still thinking about them. So, yeah. Anybody else? No? Okay, well, our next SEAC meeting is scheduled for June 18th, 2020, and I'm assuming likely in this format. So we just need a motion to adjourn. Donna, seconder, Kathy, all in favor? Everybody, yes, yeah. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.